Welcome to the Hockey Writers Sabres Scoop, a weekly show with our top Buffalo Sabres writing crew, bringing you the latest news, rumors, trades, player grades, game results, and much more. From training camp to the playoffs, from draft day to the trade deadline, our team covers everything that happens with the Sabres. So get a pen and paper and turn up the volume. You're about to get the Sabres Scoop. Sabres Scoop.
Welcome to Sabres Scoop, presented by the Hockey Writers, a once-a-week show covering all things Buffalo Sabres and NHL hockey. We thank you for joining us today, and to make sure you don't miss out on any future episodes, be sure to subscribe to and like the show on YouTube and catch the great hockey content on thehockeywriters.com. You can also find us on Twitter at SabresScoop THW and everything else at The Hockey Writer. As well, you got to make sure you head over to morningskate.io to sign up for our daily Morning Skate newsletter, so you don't miss out on the latest and weirdest hockey news every day. So today we are joined by Blain Potvin, one of our very own Montreal Canadiens writers here at THW and co-host of Habs Unfiltered, featured on THW's podcast network. You can find Blain on Twitter at Blain Potvin _THW. How are you doing tonight, Blain?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me back on the show, guys.
Of course. Yeah. Always our pleasure. We know we only have you for the first part of the show here, so let's get right into it. There's a lot of Montreal Canadiens news recently in the past week, especially, and that's why we wanted to have you on. We're going to start out with the biggest news of the past week in the hockey world, in my opinion, which involved your Canadiens. The Carolina Hurricanes extended an offer sheet to Jesperi Kotkaniemi at $6.1 million. That was the price tag. He signed the offer sheet, and now GM Marc Bergevin must match it or lose him to the Canes. And if the Habs don't match, they're going to receive a first and third round pick in return. Got a couple of questions surrounding this, so let's go to the first one. Is this payback for the Sebastian Aho offer sheet of 2 years ago? And if it is, what was your initial reaction when seeing this as someone who covers the Habs?
Well, if anyone thinks this wasn't some kind of a revenge plot, I don't know what rock they've hidden under for the last couple of years. The Canes and Dundon specifically has been hinting at this ever since the Aho offer sheet. We knew it was going to come. He said, well, I don't know, maybe it'll be Kotkaniemi. And he'd been going on about this for a couple of years. So if you thought this wasn't revenge, I'm sorry to break it to you. It is. I don't mean you specifically, Brendan, just in general, a general you. Now, it's obvious revenge. It's a revenge plot. The $20 signing bonus for Aho's number, the $15 and the offer sheet for Kotkaniemi's number, changing their Twitter bio into French using a really bad Google Translate as a francophone. It hurts me to read it. The press conferences and press releases that are word for word what Bergevin said in his, it's clear cut what they're doing. And if you hated them before, you hate them for doing this. If you loved them before, you love them for doing this. And honestly, I think it's a really good distraction to end the summer for a lot of fans. Something to do. It's fun. It's fun. It's great to see, and especially a really good distraction from the fact that they signed D'Angelo, which a lot of people didn't like. Yeah, pure revenge, and that's fine. It's part of the business too. So,
yeah. So let's get into sort of the details of this. I mean, now that we've established that, which I'm sure everybody could have read between the lines, the lines weren't even that solid. It was pretty easy to see what was going on. Yeah. Do you think Kotkaniemi is worth that $6.1 million price tag? His qualifying offer next season would have to be the same. So it definitely has cap implications for the future if they do hold on to him. And it's been reported that Carolina would like to sign him to a long-term extension at around $4 million a season, a whole 30% less. If and when they can start negotiating next January, if he does come to the team. So, I guess two-parter, do you think he's worth that price tag? And if he does go to Carolina, could you see him signing that type of deal?
He is definitely not worth that kind of money yet. Potential, hey, who knows? Maybe he is, but right now he is easily $3 million overpaid. Easily. Could he sign something along the lines of a $4 million long-term deal? Sure. But I don't know if that would be the number. If he does go to Carolina and he does sign a long-term deal for $4 million per season, then that's a coup for Carolina, because I think he's more along the $4 million mark.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, got it. Yeah, and to wrap this up, what do you think the Canadiens ultimately do? What is Marc Bergevin thinking? Because he doesn't have that much time to make a decision. A lot of people are surprised he hasn't already, and maybe he has. He's just waiting. But what would you do in this situation? And what do you think ultimately happens here?
Well, what I would do personally is I would let them sweat it out for the entire week. Would not release a single word about what I would do one way or the other. Make them guess, and then shop around. Like I'm fairly certain, I'm almost guaranteed that Bergevin is shopping around right now, saying, "Hey, I've got 2 firsts. I've got this first and his third. What'll you give me?" So rumors have been swirling, credible rumors from Eric Engels, from Elliot Friedman. Dvorak has been in their has been a target of theirs. Hertel has been a target of theirs. So if they can land someone along those lines, using some of the picks or some prospects to replace what Kotkaniemi was supposed to be, then I can see them letting him walk. But if they can't find someone to play center, then they're going to match, and they're going to have to deal with the consequences, which for them in the long term, cap wise, means they're going to have to work something out with Suzuki, because they want to have to sign him next year. They're going to have to figure out mid-season how they're going to pay Kotkaniemi, because they will no longer be cap compliant once Byron comes back off long-term injury. So they're going to have to make some moves this season just to fit him in. So if you're Carolina and you want the player, what they did was very, very smart. But in my view, I don't think they expected the Canadiens to they expect the Canadiens to match. They did this solely to mess with their cap. I don't think they really wanted the player. I think it's more a revenge tactic to mess with their cap than it is anything else.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, definitely. And Blain, you did allude to this in your last little comment. But yeah, Elliot Friedman and Eric Engels have speculated that Christian Dvorak is likely the guy that they would go for if Kotkaniemi did end up going to Carolina. So I'm just curious, what would you think of that? Say they just swap out the 1st and 3rd round pick, trade it to Arizona, Dvorak comes into Montreal and becomes that 2C. Do you like him there? I mean, Kotkaniemi probably does have the higher potential, but at this very moment, Dvorak is the better player, in my opinion. So I would just be curious to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, for right now, yeah, Dvorak would be the more productive player. You would probably pan out better in the short term. Dvorak, if you move him to a more offensive minded system like the Canadiens have versus Arizona, he'd produce a little bit more. You give him better wingers, better players to play with. He does extremely well playing with talented players. He didn't have. He's got Phil Kessel near the end of his career. He did okay with him there. But if you give him a little bit better, guys like Gallagher, who go to the net, because that's kind of his bread and butter for Dvorak. Guys like Toffoli, Anderson, people that play the type of style that he likes to play, he could produce more. So I don't think in the long term. Well, this is part of the calculus, right? If they feel that Dvorak is the better player long term, Kotkaniemi is going to be let go, and they'll pick this kid up for, I don't know, maybe the 1st and the 3rd. Let's imagine it's the 1st and the 3rd. It ends up being Kotkaniemi straight up for Dvorak, which maybe works better in the long term, but the fan base is going to eat Bergevin alive for this. No matter what happens, he is getting burnt at the stake just for letting him sign the contract, or leaving him open to signing the contract, or not picking him up, or even if he chooses to keep him, he's going to get burned alive. So it's a lose-lose for Bergevin, but I don't think he gives he doesn't care.
Yeah.
Well, he definitely doesn't. I mean, these scenarios have happened before. The past half decade, we've seen it with PK Subban for Shea Weber. And sometimes it works out for him in that instance. And I would say it probably did. But then you maybe get a Jonathan Drouin from Mikhail Sergachev. That doesn't work out as well for you. So he's willing to be bold. And I do like that in him. But we'll see if that does pay off. And, talking about being bold, we have to talk about this because there was a rumor that came out earlier in the week about Jack Eichel being spotted with his hockey sticks in hand heading to Montreal. This was first reported by Engels, but of course, it was later learned that Eichel was just attending the BioSteel camp, which many NHL players attend each offseason. In a hypothetical situation, though, or maybe not so hypothetical, who knows, do you think that the Habs could ever be part of the Eichel trade conversation?
I'm pretty sure they're in the talks for Eichel, but they're not the top end serious player for him. I don't think Buffalo wants what the Canadiens would be willing to give. I mean, clearly they would want a Caulfield or a Suzuki, but I don't think those two players are on the block, not for anyone, even Eichel. So I don't see the Canadiens ending up being the players for him, even though that he grew up a Habs fan and he would be willing to go to Montreal. So I just can't see it working out unless Buffalo dramatically drops its asking price. But I doubt that happens for a division rival.
Definitely, because in this hypothetical situation, most believe Kotkaniemi would probably be a centerpiece in the trade. And if he's gone, maybe Alexander Romanov's a part of it. But then, I mean, the Sabres don't necessarily need Romanov, considering they have Owen Power and Rasmus Dahlin. It doesn't really appear there would be a fit there. And then you're going to have to go deeper into the prospect pool. Then you would have to subtract that with more draft capital. I don't know. It would be interesting because, they're not going to. I don't think Nick Suzuki would be in that trade. How does that make your team better necessarily? You're going to have to pay twice the amount. And then your center depth is still along the lines of Jake Evans, Cedric Paquette. You don't really have a second line player to go with there. So the Habs aren't going to do that, in my opinion, based on the team that they built. So, well, we could still talk about this. What would it take in return to get Eichel to the Habs, in your opinion? And would you even be interested in having him on your team? Does that change if Kotkaniemi goes to Carolina? I'm curious to get your thoughts there, Blain.
Personally, I would have traded Kotkaniemi in a package deal for Eichel before all this happened. I mean, Eichel, when he's healthy, he's one of the best players in the NHL. He can score goals. He is what you want as a center, especially a first line center. Pardon me. The issue is his health, which I think lowers his value, but not as much as some people may think. So asking for 3 to 4 really solid pieces in a return is not out of the realm of possibilities for Buffalo. For the Canadiens, if now without Kotkaniemi to be legitimate contenders to actually land Eichel, they would have to use up both first round picks this year. If I were Buffalo, I'd be asking for Caulfield as part of that deal. And as the Canadiens GM, I would still say no. Even if it meant going without a center and having a massive step back from last season, just because in the long term, it'll be hard to justify giving up that capital without that guarantee that Eichel could ever reach the same levels that he had before. It does make it difficult. So yeah, the Buffalo GM does not have an easy task in front of him. And I don't blame him for sticking to his guns. Go for the best deal you can.
I agree, and obviously the surgery is a big component of this. I know there's some that believe the surgery could potentially be taking place soon, but it still hasn't. We don't necessarily have all of the details on that. And if Eichel's not healthy and it basically misses half of this season, you have to imagine that's going to make this trade talks go even further along. That's not even talking about if the other teams are going to agree to him having the surgery. So there's a lot at play here. That's why it's taking a long time. It's going to head into the season. And I'm curious to see how GM Kevin Adams deals with this, but lots in development there.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Moving on to the next topic here. I know we don't have you for too much longer, but there are some other things we'd like to talk about as well. The Canadiens signed forward prospect Ryan Poehling to a 2-year contract. That's pretty cool to see, which it'll see him earn $750,000 in the NHL and $250,000 in the AHL on the first year on a two-way, and then $750K in the NHL the second year on a one-way. Poehling had 25 points and 25 points in 28 games, last season in the AHL with the Laval Rockets, setting an AHL career high in goals and assists, and only his second season there. How close do you think he is to coming into the NHL full-time and making an impact on the Canadiens roster? And where could you see him playing on the roster initially, and alongside which players?
I think he's knocking at the door. He's going for him to make the team right out of camp. He's going to have a heck of a camp, because with the number of people they have on the roster, they may not want to put too many people on waivers, and he is waiver exempt. So that could mean a return to Laval to start the year. But I fully expect him to be on the roster full time by mid-season. Some kind of trade, injuries, whatever happens, I think he's going to be there. I see him starting off on the fourth line, but he is pretty much the prototype of what you want for a third line center. He's big, he's strong, he's fast, he's responsible defensively. He'll give you some offense, but at the NHL level, I think that's going to be limited. AHL, he was lighting it up. He was really dominating on pretty much every shift, physically, in every way you can think of. He didn't quite get a point per game, but he had a really slow start to the year. But by the time his timing kicked in, he was really taking over. But at the NHL level, yeah, third line. And probably on a line with someone like Anderson. Maybe Lehkonen moves his way up to the third line with him. I think those kinds of players fit well with him. They all three play. They could all three play a north-south game. They love to play the cycle, and that's exactly where Poehling really shines.
Yeah, definitely. And, to all the Sabres fans that listen to us and wondering, oh, Ryan Poehling, that name seems familiar. Well, he did score a hat trick in his first NHL game against the Toronto Maple Leafs. I would know. I was watching that. I am a closet Leafs fan as well. Well, I'm actually pretty open about it. And if I'm remembering correctly, even scored the shootout winner in that game. So just a fantastic showing for him. I mean, they probably set the expectations too high, if I'm being honest, and I'm sure Blain knows that as well. But yeah, ultimately, he's probably going to end up solidifying himself as a solid bottom six player as his career folds here. So I'll be curious to see that. And to end this off, Blain, before we know you have to get going, it was reported that Carey Price would be ready to go for the start of the season after getting knee surgery on July 23rd. So that's encouraging news, of course, for Habs fans after what he just did in this past playoffs, what he's done his whole career there. Do you expect Price to be 100% healthy when the season starts?
I expect him to be back. I don't expect him to be 100% healthy. He's notoriously slow at starting, and to be brutally honest, with Jake Allen there, they can take their time. Allen, he's fully capable of taking the lion's share of the games and letting Price ease his way into the season. Even if his knee's not 100%, take some time off, play a game, take a week off, play a game, take a week off, and let Allen kind of carry the team at the start, just like he did this season when Price was out injured. So it's good news that he's back a little bit sooner than they expected. So that'll alleviate some of the anxiety and the pressure that some of the fans felt was going to be on the team on that aspect. So it's one less issue, but somehow the Canadiens always find, for every one issue they solve, they find two more to create.
Oh, definitely. And, what expectations should Canadiens fans have for Price this season? Because coming into the playoffs, people weren't exactly that happy about Carey Price's performance, relative to his contract, which he makes $10 million, by the way. That's a lot of money, but considering how he played in the playoffs last year, and play it like how we know he's capable of, like he did in the 2015-16 season when he was the best goalie in this league. Do you think he will carry that play from the playoffs into the season, even after maybe it's a little shaky at the beginning? Do you think he could regain to that form in the regular season just to make sure the Habs can even make the playoffs next year?
I don't know if he can pull off a 929 or 930 save percentage through the regular season. I think that's a bit much for Carey Price to pull off. A 910 to a 915, maybe 920, sure. And if he can pull off something along those lines, that's his career average. About a 918 is his career average. So if he could pull something off to that level, I think the Canadiens are in pretty good shape, especially if Jake Allen can play to the levels he was playing at last year. If they both do that in their tandem, then I can say the Canadiens will be fighting for a playoff spot.
Oh, definitely. And Blain, we know you do have to go here, but thank you for joining us to talk some Canadiens hockey tonight. We really do appreciate it.
Thanks for having me on, guys. I really appreciate you bringing me back on the show after that debacle I had last time. It hurt, but you gave me a second chance, so I appreciate that.
Of course. Yeah. Thank you so much and have a good night. We understand you have a game, so good luck. Or you're playing hockey.
Yeah, going for the gold medal here, boys.
Here we go.
Free beer at the end, though.
Awesome. Love to hear it.
So you're watching Sabres Scoop presented by the Hockey Writers. Make sure to subscribe to and like the show on YouTube. Catch the great hockey content on thehockeywriters.com and on our Twitter feed at Sabres Scoop THW. Brandon, let's tease in some general NHL news in here. I'm sure I think you just got locked out at the Google Doc there, didn't you?
Yeah. That's always seems to happen, but we're back in, so you can carry it away and I'm ready to go.
Definitely, So with that, there was at least one piece of exciting Sabres news this week as Lance Hornby of the Toronto Sun reported the rumor that the Sabres and the Toronto Maple Leafs could face off in an outdoor matinee game at Tim Hortons Field in Hamilton, Ontario. So that's about halfway between Buffalo and Toronto, right across the US-Canada border. This would be the third outdoor game for the Sabres, who are 0-0-2 in outdoor games. They've lost both of them. And it would really be the second away game since it's on Canadian soil. Even though they're dedicated as the home team, they're not actually playing in Buffalo. They're actually playing in Canada, which is very intriguing about all of this. And here's the thing. The Sabres and Leafs are already scheduled to play at 3 p.m. that day at KeyBank Center. And if this outdoor game were approved, the Sabres would essentially be losing one home game. So how do we feel about this in general? Curious to get your take there, Brandon.
It's interesting. I mean, I wonder if it's even worth being upset about because of the expectations that are set for both these teams next season. The Leafs are supposed to be a good team. The Sabres are supposed to be a not so very good team. So I'm not even sure if it matters. And especially at that point in the season, I mean, this is scheduled. I don't think we wrote it on here, but it is scheduled for March 13 is when that would be of 2022. So that's toward the end of the season. Really not sure there would be many, playoff implications unless, the Sabres were able to pull something out of the hat and make a push here, but I don't expect that to happen. So, I mean, yeah, they're essentially losing one home game, but if they do honor season ticket holders with either a ticket to the game or a reimbursement or a ticket to another game or something like that, that'll be pretty cool. Not sure what they're going to do. I guess we'll just have to see it play out.
And, just as a follow-up to that, what do we think the chances of this game happening even are, especially with the uncertainty about border restrictions moving forward? I'm just curious to get your thoughts on that in general, Brandon.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely uncertainty about it. I find it, it's pretty hard to think that the NHL would, pass on this game and make an excuse to not make it happen because they've done a pretty good job executing border travel, especially for the playoffs. I mean, there were very few hiccups for these Stanley Cup playoffs that they did, especially with Montreal making, a Canadian team making the final, and it all went pretty smoothly. So I find it pretty hard to believe that they wouldn't be able to execute one outdoor game, especially because it is outdoors. And we know, statistically speaking, those are generally safer than large indoor gatherings. Nobody knows what it's going to look like come next March, but I think that it's going to be okay. And that'll be pretty exciting because I'm sure you and I would both have the chance to attend if they did allow fans.
Oh, definitely. No, I would be trying to go to that. It is pretty hilarious to me that the Buffalo's the team the NHL's choosing here to play in an outdoor game next season against the Leafs. But it makes sense that they're scheduling the Leafs as the opponent, because knowing the Leafs, they're probably going to blow it anyways. Even if Buffalo's the worst team in the NHL, they're expected to lose. They'll find a way to win, because I'm sure the Leafs will have some crazy moment. We've seen it in years past with the Zamboni driver blowing a 3-1 series lead last year. They'll find a way to lose, even if they're projected to win, I'm sure.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sure. But I do hope that game does happen, because that's a pretty cool thing. To my knowledge, there hasn't been an NHL game in Hamilton, right? So, at least not an outdoor game. So that's pretty cool. That'd be awesome to see. And we move on to everybody's favorite segment of our show at this point, updating you on the Jack Eichel trade situation. So we do have an update on this, believe it or not. This is pretty significant, I would say. Jack Eichel just switched agents and will now be represented by Pat Brisson. Keep in mind, he had Peter Fish and Peter Donatelli representing him up until this last week, and now Brisson will represent him moving forward. This all coming, of course, when the trade talk has become pretty much stagnant surrounding Eichel. So a report from earlier this week suggested that Brisson wants to expedite this process as much as possible. And also, Kevin Adams is now looking for 4 to 6 pieces in return for Jack Eichel. That's up from the 4 pieces we initially heard. I hadn't heard 6 pieces until now. So do we think Brisson will be able to speed this up? Can he help? Will he be able to apply the pressure that his old agents couldn't?
Well, I mean, that's what Jack Eichel appears to be betting on here. We've seen it with the emoji tweet. We saw it in the statement that was made a couple months ago. They want something to happen here. They believed he was already going to get traded, and it hasn't happened. Pat Brisson, man, this guy's a reputation with GMs along the league. This guy will make sure his client is in the best care. So he's going to do whatever he can to speed up this process. I have to imagine it does. I don't necessarily know how much. I don't actually know what's going to happen here this month with Eichel heading into training camp, if he's going to get moved or not, because he hasn't even had the surgery yet. So I think at very least, and we did hear from Sean Simpson of TSN that the surgery could be happening soon. I think the surgery potentially could be happening this month, if I had to guess, just because Pat Brisson is going to attempt to speed this up. So then we at least have somewhat of a timeline when Jack Eichel could even play hockey again. I think that's the start there. And then hopefully a trade can resume, presumably when a team's ready, to make that deal and they feel comfortable doing so.
You're right. Yeah, definitely a resolution of some sort to his medical situation, to this whole surgery thing that's been put off for so long is definitely needed to get something done, in my opinion. But, people are now saying on Twitter on behalf of Eichel that he's going to have surgery pretty soon, like you mentioned, but he will not be ready until roughly mid-December at the earliest, based on what we've heard this past week. So will that fact affect the trade process at all, that a team is going to have to wait until pretty much midpoint of the season to see him in their team's lineup?
Well, I think it definitely is, and I think it already has. That's why he kind of hasn't been moved yet. I know we're talking about a $10 million player there, so that's another hiccup. I just don't know, man. Like we always like to compare it to Matt Duchene, because that's probably the best case scenario for Sabres fans. They look at what Matt Duchene garnered in the trade after all of the off-ice issues with him revolving Patrick Roy and the whole Colorado organization. They were still able to get the likes of Samuel Girard back, plus first-round picks, plus everybody they wanted. So they're hoping in their eyes, especially how I imagine Kevin Adams looks at that as well and thinks, I want to be able to get that as well, potentially even more. But if Eichel can't even play this season until potentially January, that's definitely going to alter the trade value there, because a team wants to get him to try to win the cup this season. Because if you do that, if he doesn't have the surgery until later on in the season and he doesn't play until at least December, it could even be more, by the way. We don't know. There could be complications with the surgery. It hasn't been done on anybody yet at the NHL level. It never has. There's so many complications here. And we're so close. Teams have already solidified the rosters, and they're just going to add a $10 million player to that. How are you going to make that work? Well, that's what all these other teams are asking. How are you going to make that work? I don't know how they're going to make it work. It's going to be interesting here. But Kevin Adams is playing the patient game here. I like his moves as of late since the NHL draft. I am confident in him. I like Sam Ventura's influence in this organization. They're making the right moves. I mean, hey, the patience paid off in Rasmus Ristolainen. They got the 13th overall pick in a second rounder. Who would have thought that after all the bad seasons Risto's kind of had? You would have thought, I thought potentially a late first rounder was possible, not the 13th overall pick. That was shocking. So if they can play that type of game with Eichel and it pays off, then maybe it won't affect the trade process at all. And maybe the Sabres do get value. But honestly, I can't give you a definitive answer there. I think we're just going to have to see how it plays out.
Yes, we are. Totally agree.
Definitely, and head into some general NHL news here to wrap up the show. Colton Parayko, defender for the St. Louis Blues, has re-signed with St. Louis at 8 years at $6.5 million AAV. What do we think of this deal, Brandon? So most like it I've seen generally out of the fan base, but looking at some of the public models available like Jay Fresh Hockey, he's been on this show. It shows that his back injury from this last season kind of did affect his play, notably in terms of his expected goals numbers, his offensive play drivers, his offensive numbers. Sorry, he did actually rock a pretty high shooting percentage this past season. So you have to wonder potentially that goes down. His numbers don't look that great next year, and you're now going to have to pay him now for 7 years after that. I just wonder, what do you think of this? Because he didn't have a great season last year, and now he's expected to have 8 very good ones.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. A back injury is no, laughing matter especially for a defenseman. I feel like that some defensemen have been pretty, hugely affected by this. I mean, Dustin Byfuglien is somebody who comes to mind who suffered a back injury and never really was the same. Now, Colton Parayko, I think, is definitely worth that price tag. 6.5 sounds about right for him. And ever since Alex Pietrangelo left the St. Louis Blues organization, you sort of thought Parayko was going to slide in as that big hulking right shot on their blue line and really fill that gap. Now, it's hard to replace Pietrangelo, but Parayko's the closest thing you're going to get to that. I like him as a player. 8 years is the thing that concerns me, and it's because of the reasons you just said. I mean, his play has been affected by some things. He's expected to be the best defenseman on the team, the power play quarterback, and all, wear all these different hats. And for 8 seasons, it's really hard to do, especially someone who's been through what he's been through. So I'm a little weary about the term. I'm going to be honest, but for a few seasons at least, I think they're going to like this. They're going to reap the benefits of it. After that, it's going to become very difficult. But I'm curious to see, your thoughts on this.
No, I'm curious as well. Looking at St. Louis's decor, they got Torrey Krug making around this as well, $6.5 million. Justin Falk making $6.5 million. And then they do it again with the cap off the trio here in Colton Parayko, $6.5 million. Now, that's a decent amount of money. They basically have they don't have a definitive number one defenseman, in my opinion. Colton Parayko was that. A few years ago, this guy was one of the better defensemen in the NHL. He was underrated. I remember having that conversation about him. Now, if anything, he's probably slightly overrated. And if he can't get back to his play of a few years ago, where he was just among the best defensive defensemen in the NHL, he was able to shut down the opposition at all areas in the defensive zone, limiting, turnovers in the defensive zone. Great player. I just don't think this is going to work out for St. Louis in the long term. I think they're a team that's kind of, we're seeing that with all these first round exits. They're not a Stanley Cup contender anymore. And now they're committing 8 years to a guy. And I get why they're committing it. They need to keep some guys around. But now you have 3 of these players, and Krug, Falk, and Parayko signed long term. I don't really like that plan going forward for St. Louis, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it almost smells of exactly what the San Jose Sharks did, mistakenly signing their older blue liners to long-term contracts. I don't know if it's as, egregious as some of those contracts, like to Marc-Edouard Vlasic or Brent Burns, but I mean, and Erik Karlsson, can't forget him, but I mean, it is pretty similar. It tells me that they think that they're going to be able to sort of rebuild on the fly and really quickly retool their core and make another push, make another run here, especially with Binnington locked up long-term in goal. But I just don't know if St. Louis is in a position to do that, especially in their division when every other team seems to be getting better and they're sort of, like you said, on the decline. So that is a little concerning. But we'll just have to wait and see. I do hope Parayko, rebounds, plays better. He's a good player to watch. So let's go into our last thing here. If you guys weren't paying attention to the Women's World Championships, now you are. Team Canada won the World Championships this past week, and Marie-Philip Poulin scoring the overtime winner to defeat the U.S. 3-2 in overtime, I believe it was. So that was an exciting tournament that all hockey fans were paying attention to. And of course, Poulin has been a Canadian hero in these women's championships, for many years now. What did we think of this game, and what needs to happen for women's hockey to be showcased more on a consistent basis and shown to more casual fans? Because if you aren't a very diehard hockey fan, you didn't watch this. You probably haven't seen it. It just doesn't get the same airtime, the same coverage, at least, especially in the United States, that it does in Canada or as men's hockey. But it is just as exciting. I mean, Marie-Philip Poulin is a household name, and there are many, many talented players, especially when the U.S. and Canada plays each other. So if you could speak to that a little, Jordan, and just give your thoughts on that.
Oh, this was such an excellent game, man. Especially, we're starting to get a little bit more started for hockey coming into the NHL season. The fact that this game tournament was happening in general was just fantastic. I want to highlight somebody on Twitter at Hunter of Stats for providing some analytical breakdowns of these games, showcasing the shot map, expected goals numbers, Corsi numbers as well for this game. Canada really was the better team here. And I know that they didn't start off that well for them, but ultimately in terms of their expected goals for, it was at 58% compared to Team USA's 42. Their Corsi was 51 compared to Team USA's 49%. They were able to persevere there. And you saw that early in the tournament when they won 5-1. They were able to look good there. And compared to years past, this past decade, Canada hasn't looked good at the World Championships. Team USA has been the team that's been dominant. So to see Canada come back like this with Marie-Philip Poulin, who just comes so clutch in these games. Like, we can have a debate about what her best game-winning gold medal goal is. Like, that's a crazy debate just to be able to have for any player, but she makes it look easy. So in terms of that, this is an entertaining product and people should want to watch this. Now, what's going to have to happen for this to be showcased more on a consistent basis? Well, I'm just going to have to say this. The PWHPA and the NWHL are going to have to, which does appear to be happening, but I would say it's probably not happening fast enough. They should be forming an agreement here. They should be merging. There shouldn't be two separate associations. The NHLPA works with the NHL. That's why this works. That's why the product works for both the fans and the players. It works out for everybody. It gets the game more exposure. If the NWHL and PWHA come together to form one big league, however they want to do it, all the players realigning, working together, you have to imagine it's going to get showcased more. It's not that it's not doing that great. I mean, really good numbers for this game. We just want to see more than that because we don't want to have to wait so long until the Olympics, to really get showcased, women's hockey. I want to see it, as we do with the end, as we do just in general, because the NWHL playoffs, even from this past season, was fun to watch as well. And they can kind of figure it out like the WNBA has, I think it's going to be best for the sport, in my opinion.
Definitely. I totally agree. Any parting thoughts here for our fans? I know there wasn't too much Sabres content, but that's just because we are in the slow part of the off season. And like we say, in the coming weeks, things could speed up a lot, especially if there's an Eichel trade. But any parting thoughts for our fans?
Yeah, just make sure you comment anything below because we are kind of heading into the season here. I think the next few episodes will start to ramp up just a little bit, but make sure, just comment anything that you want us to talk about and we'll make sure to get to it because we have a few things we want to discuss next episode. This is a fan interactive show. Make sure you comment what you want to talk about, especially, if it doesn't make Brandon's mailbag, which he just posted this past week as well, today, actually, I believe, his Sabres mailbag. Any questions that don't make it there, make sure you ask it to comment in our YouTube section because we will address them on this show.
Definitely. Yeah. Somebody commented last episode there was something they wanted us to do, and we'll make sure to do it as the season approaches. And other than that, we thank you for joining us. This has been Sabres Scoop presented by the Hockey Writers. Make sure to subscribe to the show on YouTube and follow us on Twitter at Sabres Scoop THW. And once again, make sure you head over to morningskate.io to sign up for our daily Morning Skate newsletter so you don't miss the latest and weirdest hockey news every day. And thanks again to Blain for joining us tonight. It was great to talk some Habs and NHL news, and we're always happy to get to talk to him. Make sure you follow him on Twitter at Blain Potvin _THW. Seriously, he's a good writer. Go listen to Habs Unfiltered as well. Don't miss out on all of the great hockey content on thehockeywriters.com. For Jordan and Blain, this is Brandon, and this has been Sabres Scoop. Until next time.